What's up YouTube, it's your boy Nash here. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another episode of Yu-Gi-Oh's Biggest Issue. This week's episode is on Hidden Arsenal 4, Trishula's Triumph, and the April 2011 format. So by now we've entered a format where Teledad became a thing of the past, with the fact that Dark Arm Dragon got limited to 1, Emergency Teleport got limited to 1, hence it stayed at 1 up until recently, in today's Yu-Gi-Oh, where it's now back up at 2, which is kind of funny, and not only that, but Goyo Guardian got an errata where now you need an Earth Tuner. Yes, you heard me right, we now need an Earth Tuner. Now we've entered an era in Yu-Gi-Oh where we're slowly starting to enter the XYZ era where literally any XYZ monster that you could find in a booster box or a starter deck that you bought, that was basically what you would use. And there were literally several different decks in the April 2011 format that became extremely broken. Full Force Infernities, Black Wings, Rescue Cat slash X-Sabers. X-Sabers became extremely powerful with the addition of Rescue Cat that was, I believe, in Rise of Destiny, if I remember correctly? Either that or Soul of the Duelist. It was one or the other. Plants, or Tengu Plants for that matter, Quick Draw variants, and one of the most intriguing decks of the format at that time, Six Samurai. What's the one thing that they all have in common is the fact that they were running cards from Hidden Arsenal 1, 2, 3, and 4, known as Trishula's Triumph, which was released in North America on April 19th, 2011, in Europe and in the and in other countries both on April 15th, 2011, and it was released in French, German, Italian, and Spanish on April 14th, 2011. In Korea, in Korea, they never got it until December 6th, 2011, which was where we were starting to enter, which was right around the time that the XYZ era started to come into the fold. And of course, Spanish or Latin America, April 19th, 2011, around the time that the North American one was released. As I said before, with Hidden Arsenal 1, there were only a couple cards that were used during this time, during Edison format and whatnot. Cards like Brionic, I think Brionic was like one of the biggest cards that was used in the format, as was Mistworm. Once we got to Hidden Arsenal 2, there really wasn't a whole lot to discuss with that one, but there were still a few cards that were pretty viable back then. With Hidden Arsenal 3, which was last week's episode, Gungnir, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, Ally Justice, Decisive Armor were like the two big, and also Naturia Barkion were like the three big cards that were used during this time. But once we got into Hidden Arsenal 4, we ended up getting some incredible support. We got new support for Gen X, Fabled, Dragonides, Jirax, Naturias, and Ice Barrier, as well as sub-archetypes for each of them, such as Neo Flamvel, Gen X Ally, and also just a bunch of really other incredible cards. So just to go through the card by card of what was in this set, I'll explain how not all of them, but how a lot of these never became like really viable. So obviously we have Gen X Ally Remote. I believe this was where I'm gonna actually take a look at the effect. Let's see. Once per turn, you can select one face-up tuner monster on the field. The selected monster's name is treated as Gen X controller until the end phase. So basically, it was a way for you to it was basically sort of like a really bad version of what's that one Xyz? I can't even think of it right now. It was pretty bad. It was a pretty bad card. Gen X Ally Power Cell, Ally Changer, Volcanon, which is actually kind of a funny one. Gen X Ally Solid, the Fabled Chawa, the Fabled Catsith. That's actually pretty clever. The Fabled Cerberil, the Fabled Ganashia, the Fabled Nozuchi, Draguni Militum, Draguni Primus Pillis, Draguni Brandistock, Draguni Javelin. This is one that Javelin became one of the more better Dragunities of this set because the effect reads if this face-up card is destroyed while in the monster card zone, you can equip it to one face-up Winged Beast Draguni monster you control instead of sending it to the graveyard. So it's more. So it was kind of like a Crystal Beast. It was kind of like a much more revamped version of a Crystal Beast, where instead of sending it to the graveyard, you can actually send it to your back row and equip it to a monster that you have on the field, which was really cool. Jurak Dino, Jurak Gallim, Jurak Aeolo, Jurak Hera, Jurak Hera, Naturia Butterfly, Naturia Ladybug, Naturia Strawberry, Defender of the Ice Barrier. This was a tuner monster that became kind of an interesting one because it says while you control another Ice Barrier monster, monsters your opponent controls cannot declare an attack if their attack is greater than or equal to this card's attack. So it was a really, really bad, like a really bad gravity bind. Literally, it was a really bad gravity bind. So this was one that a lot of people had to use simply because of the fact that there weren't a whole lot of tuners in the Ice Barrier engine that were really good. So Defender was like one of the biggest one was like one of the main cards that you had to have in the Ice Barrier strategy, but Ice Barriers didn't really do a whole lot because the tuners were mainly used to go into the Ice Barrier dragons, such as Trishula, such as Brionic, Gungnir, just to name a few. So that was that was pretty crazy. Really crazy, but really bad card to play back in the day. Warlock of the Ice Barrier, Sacred Spirit of the Ice Barrier, General Ryo of the Ice Barrier, Gen X Ally Triarm, the Fabled Unicorn, Draguni Knight Trident. This was another one. This was one of the other synchros that I was talking about that actually was not only viable with Black Wings because it required a non-tuner winged beast, but you could also mix it in with a dragon tuner, which there weren't a whole lot of dragon tuners. Hence the reason why a lot of people would mix Black Wings with the Dragunies, because people bought into the delusion that they mixed so well together, but they really did it because they were polar opposites of one another. The Black Wings were more so of spamming the board with a bunch of Blackwing synchros, where as opposed to the Dragunies, it was more they were more so suited for equips and also spamming the board with a bunch of equip cards on the field. Hence the reason Dragoonies actually did not do as perfect as Blackwings did during this format, which was pretty crazy. But Dragoonii Trident required a dragon tuner and a wing beast non-tuner, or more, one or more of course. Once per turn, you can send up to 3 cards you control to the grave to look at your opponent's extra deck and send an equal number of cards from there to the graveyard. So basically, it was basically a reverse triple extra fool's burial. What that means is where it's simple. You just send cards from your extra deck to the grave, but the roles were reversed because you could send your opponent's cards to the graveyard right off the bat. But the only downside is that during this time, Monster Reborn, I believe Monster Reborn was starting to slowly get banned. It was slowly starting to get banned because of how crazy the card was, with the fact that you can revive it, you can bring it back to your hand with cards like cards like Jar of Avarice. It was still pretty. I think Jar of Avarice was around during this time, if I remember correctly. But yeah, with cards like Jar of Avarice, Magical Stone Excavation, which I believe was from, I think it was a promo, if I remember correctly, a video game promo, if I remember right. But that was another one that was pretty viable back in the day. Drag Meteor, Naturia Landois, Neo Flamvel Origin, Neo Flamvel Hedgehog, Neo Flamvel Shaman, Neo Flamvel Garuda, and Neo Flamvel Saber. This was another one that actually became somewhat decent, if you will. So my fire stick literally went to sleep. Literally, my fire stick went to sleep. Anyway, let's see. The card reads: while your opponent has 4 or less cards in their grave, this card gains 600 attack. While your opponent has 8 or more cards, this card loses 300 attack. So this was a pretty bad card because you would need to ensure that this card would gain the extra attack, but nobody used it because of that reason. This was another one of those like really bad cards that it saw some play, but people realized it's not that good. It was never that good to begin with. Gen X Ally Chemistrer, I believe it's the name. Gen X Ally Birdman. This was this one. I believe this was the one that. Yeah, I believe so. This one ended up getting limited both in the OCG and in the TCG. A number of years ago, and it's still limited to this day because of its overwhelming power, which says you can return 1 face-up monster you control to the hand, special summon this card from your hand, but banish it when it leaves the field. Also, it gains 500 attack if the return. Also it gains 500 attack if the returned monster was wind on the field. This was basically you could compulse a monster that you have on the field to your hand, summon this card, which was basically a Cyber Dragon, and it gains 5, but you have to banish it when it leaves the field. Also, it gains 500 attack, and that's pretty broken. But what people don't know is that once we got into the XYZ era, there were so many. There were actually quite a few rank 3 XYZ monsters, and easily you could bypass the banish effect by using the monster as the material to summon an XYZ monster. And all you do is just detach and send it to the graveyard, and you can still keep the card in your graveyard. That's one of the big key things about those types of cards. When you see a card that has an effect that says but banish it when it leaves the field, you instantly have to use it as Xyz material. You cannot use it as any other material, because if you do, you'll end up banishing it, which is something that a lot of people don't want to do. And Birdman was one of those cards, so it's pretty crazy. Gen X Ally Bellflame, Gen X Ally Crusher, Gen X Ally Reliever, the Fable Pegasus, I believe is the name, the Fable Kotader, the Fable Dianora, Dragoonity Corseska, Dragoonity Partisan, Dragoonity Pilum, Dragoonity Angus the Clavel, Naturia Stinkbug, Naturia Mantis, Naturia Ragweed, Naturia White Oak, Strategist of the Ice Barrier. This is another one that this was another one that actually was kind of an interesting one. It was kind of an interesting one, because it says once per turn you can send one Ice Barrier monster from your hand to the grave, draw one card. This was basically Dark World dealings for the Ice Barrier archetype. So yeah, that was pretty good. That was a pretty decent card. A lot of people didn't use this card a whole lot, only because of the fact that drawing one card was never good enough. So that's why people would try to implement cards that let you draw two instead of just one, which is kind of a weird one. Secret Guards of the Ice Barrier and General Gantala of the Ice Barrier. And now we move on into some of the more better cards of the set, starting with Naturia Exterior, which was actually the only fusion of the set, which actually needed Beast and Barkion. So you needed Naturia Beast and Naturia Barkion, and it was a 10-star fusion with 2,800 attack and 2,400 defense, and it's still useful in today's meta, which is crazy. And the effect reads: a fusion summon of this card can only be conducted with the above fusion material monsters. While this card is face up on the field, you can negate the activation of a spell or trap card and destroy it by removing from play one from your graveyard, then sending the top card of your deck to the grave. This was basically Solemn Judgment. People forget that during this time, Solemn Judgment got banned. Solemn Warning ended up getting limited, if my memory serves correctly. So people needed a way to implement negate on board, and Naturia Exterior was one of only very few that was viable in this format. So being able to just banish a card at random, any card from your grave, and then milling a card from your deck straight to the graveyard, that's a pretty good effect, especially if the top card of your main deck has an effect where it could just be revived to the field. Absolutely insane. Ancient Flamvel Deity. This was kind of an interesting one, I will say. This was kind of an interesting card, because it says, when this card is synchro summoned, remove from play cards from your opponent's grave up to the number of cards in their hand. This card gains 200 attack for each removed from play by this effect. This would tie into Gen X Ally Birdman, where no. Where is it? Oh, no, Flamvel Saber. This would tie into Flamvel Saber, where you can actually, where you can ensure that not only does Deity gain attack, but so does Saber as well. So that was kind of an interesting effect, and it did get a couple of erratas over time. but I can't even read them actually. So because it's translated in, because it's in Japanese, I can't read Japanese, unfortunately. But yeah. But yeah, it did get an errata. I don't remember what the original effect was, but yeah, this was a really weird one. But it was a 2500 beat stick on board, so it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad. Gen X Ally Triforce. This is actually kind of a funny one. Because the name was actually, truth be told, the name was based off of The Legend of Zelda, which again, hence the name Triforce. That I find actually kind of funny. I find that so hilarious, so funny. I find that really funny. So it required a Gen X tuner and at least one or more non-tuner monsters. This card's effects depend on the attributes of its non-tuner single material monsters. So if you use an Earth non-tuner, the effect reads: if this card attacks, your opponent cannot activate spell or trap cards until the end of the damage step. If you use fire, if this card destroys a monster by battle, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the attack of the destroyed monster. Light. If you use light, once per turn, you can send a light monster in your grave. You can select a light monster in your grave and special summon it in face down defense. So this was basically, it was basically 3 different effects in one. So it was a Imperial Order Royal Decree, a Infernity Doom Dragon, and a Monster Reborn all rolled into one. And what I mean by Imperial Order Royal Decree, it's the Earth effect, where your opponent can't activate spell or trap cards until the end of the damage step. So basically, again, spell cards, trap cards, your opponent can't use it. Hence the name Imperial Order Royal Decree. This was a kind of an interesting one, given the name out Triforce. Probably the most hilarious name ever, but it does make sense, which is kind of funny. The Fabled Kudabi was kind of a weird one. This one was kind of weird. So it's kind of funny because the effect reads: this card gains the following effects based on the number of cards in your hand. 0, this card cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. 3 or more, destroy this card during the end phase. You literally would have to have no cards in your hand to use this card, which nobody used this card. This was one of the that card was one of the worst ones ever. Draguni Knight Barcha was not the greatest. In a way, it was decent, but it wasn't as good as it was back then. Because again, as I said, once we started to get into the Xyz format, people started to become more strategic when it came to this format, and when it came to the Draguni Knights, excuse me, the Dragunity decks needed pretty much their whole extra deck had to be nothing but Dragunity Knights, as well as like maybe 1 or 2 generic synchros in their deck. So Dragunity Knight Barcha was actually one of those Dragunity Knights that had to be in the deck just for no reason at all. And the effect says, when this card is synchro summon, you can select any number of Dragon Dragunity monsters in your grave and equip them to this card. This card gains 300 attack for each Dragunity card equipped to this card. This was basically a much more, I want to say, a much more revamped version of Arm Samurai BenK, where BenK, I believe BenK gives you allows you to equip cards from your graveyard. If I remember correctly, I'm gonna look it up on Neuron right now, just to be sure. But as I'm trying to look it up, because my phone is sort of slow, so to speak. Here we are. Let's see. Here we are. Arm Samurai BenK. For each card equipped to this card gains 1 additional attack during each battle phase. So it was kind of it was kind of like BenK, but no, not this one. Guilford the Legend. Guilford the Legend, I think was the one that I was referring to. Yep, I was right. Cannot be special summon. When this card is normal summon, you can equip as many equipped cards from your graveyard as possible to a warrior type monster you control, i.e. Guilford the Legend. This was basically, this card Bartra was basically this card, was basically that. So it was kind of a much more revamped version of it, but yeah, being able to just, and then giving this card an additional 300 attack. That's basically the mage power effect, which is pretty fucking broken if I say so myself. And then the last card that I'm going to talk about is obviously Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier. I believe this card had gotten multiple erratas over the years because of its overwhelming power, and what you're about to see is insane. So the original effect of Trishula said, when this card is synchro summon, you can activate this effect to remove from play up to 1 card each from your opponent's hand, field, and graveyard. The card in the hand is chosen at random. The first errata so that original effect was from Dual Terminal 4, and the errata came around the time that came when Hidden Arsenal 4 was released. So the errata said, when this card is synchro summon, you can activate this effect to remove from play. Okay, hold on, let's see. Let's see here. When this card is synchro summon, you can remove. I believe it was It was basically the same thing, but they removed the part where it says activate this effect to remove from play. Where it said you can remove up to 1 card each from each hand, field, graveyard. The second errata actually was kind of an interesting one, because this was from because the second errata was released in High Speed Riders, where the effect said when this card is synchro summon, you can banish up to 1 card each from your opponent's hand, field, and graveyard. The card in hand is chosen at random. Now the current effect, which was released in Battles of Legend Light's Revenge, has the effect where it says, when this card is synchro summon, you can banish up to 1 card each from your opponent's hand, field, and graveyard. So yeah, it's kind of a bad one. Yeah, it was a pretty bad. It was pretty bad. But having the fact that that this card had to get an errata did not surprise me at all. It did not surprise me, but but yeah, basically you ban it. But now the current errata says that you have to banish a card. So back then this card was pretty good. A nice little beat stick on board, 9-star beat stick. It was pretty good. So was this set good? Yes, because of the fact that because of cards like because of cards like Dragoon Javelin became viable. Defender of the Ice Barrier became pretty decent, and not only that, but during this time there were several sets that were around during this time. Sets like the 2011 Duels Pack Tins, Storm of Ragnarok, the Dragoon Legion Structure Deck, Extreme Victory, Duels Pack Crow, and of course also the Lost Sanctuary Structure Deck, all of which in which the decks you can make with those sets in particular all were able to run cards like Naturia Barkion, Naturia Beast, Naturia Exterior, Gen X Ally Triforce if you were running multiple attributes, as well, Barcha, Trishula. This set was pretty good, but once we get into Hidden Arsenal 5 Steel Swarm Invasion, that one's going to be a very interesting episode, so I'm looking forward to it. But that brings me to the question of the day. What deck were you guys playing during this format, during the Hidden Arsenal 4 format? Let me know in the comments below, and that is going to do it for this episode of Yu-Gi-Oh's Biggest Issue. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button if you guys are new to the channel and you guys want more episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh's Biggest Issue, which gets posted every Friday. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you guys do not miss out on any new content that comes your way. And be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. All the links will be down in the description below. And if you guys have any fan mail that you want to send me and want me to open up on the channel, my address will also be in the description as well. And on that, this is your boy Nash, signing out.